Okay, so to start, I'm just going to wet the outside edge and that highlight area just with water. I want those edges to stay soft. So I'm going all the way around the outside edge of that lemon. And then there's the highlight, and then coming in with just the lemon yellow to start. And I'm touching the lemon inside and around the highlight area. And then it'll float into that water that you already put down and give you a soft edge to begin with. Then I start filling in the center and adding more of the deep yellow towards the center. And then I blend some of the yellows together and try to keep it more lemony on the top where the highlight is, because that's that nice light yellow and give that soft glow. And then while it's still wet, you can drop in some of those shadow areas, but go ahead and blend and lift. Keep that area smooth, especially where the highlight is. So I'm just using some of the French ultramarine with the rose and then pulling it into that yellow there, and that makes that kind of dirty purple brown, which is good color for the shadows. I'm only doing the bottom side where it's in the shade, kind of blending it up. So I'm keeping that top edge really nice and soft and that highlight nice and light. Then I'll go ahead and dry it all the way. So then I'll take some of that same dirty purple color and dip my toothbrush into it. I'll scrub it into there, and then I will flick some little dots onto the lemon. And then you can just blot it with a paper towel wherever it's too much. So now we start adding the glow underpainting for the leaves, and I'm just going to wet the area and try to keep the highlight areas clear. So I'm dropping in the deeper yellow for the shadowy areas and then switching to the lemon yellow where the light areas are, where it's getting hit more by the sun. The area was where it's really bright, I try to just keep those where it's the white of the paper. And then once you get those yellows on, go ahead and dry it all the way before you start doing the greens. So we've got a few different greens we can make here, and all of the light, bright colored greens, the more pure looking greens you can make with the lemon yellow, and then by adding in the deep yellow, you'll get more of the earthy olive greens. The brightest green will be the lemon yellow and the turquoise. So that's the color you use for all the really light areas. And then the green from the French ultramarine, those are for the shadowy areas. So I have a few different varieties ready to go, and I'll start by laying in the bright green on the top of the sunny area here, and I'm just painting the green up to the edge of the veins, and then with water kind of pulling it out to the outside of the leaves so you still see that yellow glowing through. And then down at the bottom where it curves inside and there's a little bit of a shadow, that's where I touch in the French ultramarine. So you want to just float the greens over the yellow and have the yellow still glowing through. So let that side dry and jump over to the other leaf. So I'm going to start on that curved area where it's curving away from the sun into the shade. So I got more of the French ultramarine green mix. So then I'll switch down to this lower leaf with the brighter green, since it's the sunny side. So that's the turquoise and the lemon yellow green mix. And then I'll come back later after it's dry and put that drop shadow on there. Switch over to this leaf and put the shadow side on the bottom, the French ultramarine green mix. And then I'll start going around the veins again on this top leaf with the lighter green. And the shadow on the bottom. So after I dry it, then I come back in and put in that drop shadow with the French ultramarine green mix. So after my leaves, I start putting in the sticks, and I start with just that cerulean blue, and I'm just doing the shadow side on the stick to start giving it a bit of shape and form. Then I'm going to mix up like a warm brown. I'll have it more on the rose side to keep it warmer. So I pull in the French ultramarine, the deep yellow, and the rose, and heavy on the rose. And I just go right over that cerulean blue. And remember, we want to keep that highlight side light, the same as the lemon. So the left side will be the light side. So now we gotta get all of the wet, soft edges down here around the outsides of the focal point. So I'm just gonna wet one section at a time, keep this manageable. And we want to flow from one color to the next, and it can't be too wet or your colors are going to shoot all over the place. So I'm wetting the paper first, and then I will have mostly pigment and not that much water in my brush. So on the bottom part, I'm keeping the colors kind of more dull and dark. And then when I get to the top part, I'll use some of those more pure, brighter blues and greens. But down here, sticking with mostly dull colors, and then I'm going to slash some straight rose into there. And the rose is there to add some extra color and give it some movement. And then I'm also going to be mixing some darks into there too, but mostly I'm just sort of painting in some loose representations of leaves. And I'm also dashing in some of the raw sepia. That's my darkest dark. It's just a really dark brown. So I want extra dark around those edges, and then I'll be careful to keep the highlight, especially on the other side where the sun is coming from. I'll leave a little bit of a white space. So I get nice and dark in here, especially around these focal points. You want to have the really high contrast, so you need the really dark around the outside of it. So I'm pulling my color down one color into the next, and I am keeping that highlight. If you wet the area first, that's one thing you have to be really careful of, is to not get too close, because then your color will just bleed out into the side and you won't be able to stop it. You really want to keep that highlight. And now I'm getting this whole area wet again. And make sure I get those good darks in next to the focal point. And then using the greens and the pinks and the darks to divide up little areas of shapes, but don't have too many shapes or that can become distracting. So now we're getting into the top areas where things start shifting more towards the blue. So I'm going to throw in just some straight turquoise green because that will give me a nice pop up here color. But I'm still using my darks around the focal point to make sure that I have plenty of contrast there. And then I add some of the straight cerulean as well. That'll be that softer blue, and then go into the French ultramarine. The French ultramarine and the turquoise and the cerulean all make a really nice blue backdrop for that lemon yellow. And then the rose, that's like the spice color going throughout. Now this last section, saved the most difficult part for the end, because in this part we actually have to make our wet shapes look a little bit like something, keep that lemon in the background. So I'll start working from left to right and try to keep the paint flowing so I don't get any hard edges. So I'm really using a lot of just straight blues up here in the top area. Got the French ultramarine, and then I put some cerulean into that, some turquoise into that. And then here I've got some kind of loose sort of leaf shapes. Just enough so where you can make out what it is. And slightly define it with some dark edges. And then I'm going to just kind of paint around that lemon, and I will come back in and get that lemon last. We want to keep those yellows nice and pure. And there you have it.